So Sonic Superstars came out like 3 weeks ago, and opinions on it have been wildly varying to say the least. It's clear that it hasn't exactly gotten the overwhelmingly glowing reception that Sonic Mania did. Personally, when I finished it, I was thinking, that was an alright experience. Kinda wish I went for Super Mario Bros. Wonder instead. Yeah, being honest, this game blew my mind with how badly it fumbled the bag in certain areas. But before I get into my overall thoughts, I feel like we should go into this game's development backstory. One thing I was surprised to learn is that Takashi Iizuka, the head of Sonic Team in case you didn't know, originally wanted to collaborate with the dev team from Sonic Mania to work on this game, but those plans fell through. How so? I wasn't able to find any information on that, but it led to Sonic Team collaborating with Arzest, a development company headed by Naoto Oshima, the original character designer for both Sonic and Dr. Eggman, and their resume include prestigious titles such as We Play Motion, Yoshi's New Island, Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, and Balan Wonderworld. Yeah. That concerning resume aside, Sonic Superstars aim to continue the resurgence of the classic Sonic games brought about by Sonic Mania, this time adding a new twist with individual powers gained by collecting each individual Chaos Emerald. No longer do you have to wait until you get all 7 to get some benefit from them, now you get a new ability with each individual emerald. How well did it go about this? Well, we'll get into that, but let's talk about the story first. Go ahead and skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid spoilers. Though it is a classic Sonic game, the story isn't really the main focus for most people, but to each their own. The story isn't really explained in-game very well. We first see Dr. Eggman paying Fang the Sniper for a job well done collecting some giant animals to be turned into badniks, but he also wants him to find this dragon for him too. Also working for Eggman is a new character, Trip the Sun Gazer, a native of the North Star Islands which this game takes place on. Eggman and Fang don't treat Trip very well, as you'd expect, and eventually she gets tired of their bullcrap and defects to the hero side. After blowing up Death Egg number 452, Trip runs through the whole campaign again to get her get back against Fang for bullying her. Then suddenly a giant dragon appears, probably the same one Eggman was looking for. With the help of Super Sonic, Trip is able to seal it back in its egg and all's well that ends well. When playing through the game, the major events feel quite disjointed and random, especially if you didn't read the prequel comics or watch the prequel animation. When you get to the last story, it's just like, okay, now there's a giant dragon. No build up, no foreshadowing, it just pops up, you beat it and you're like, okay, that was a thing. Makes the ending of the game feel pretty unsatisfying. It can be assumed that Eggman wanted to use the dragon in his plans to take over the world, like with Chaos in Sonic Adventure, and over the course of the story, something was done to piss off the dragon and wake it up. It's not like this is the biggest failure of the game or anything, as most people don't really play classic Sonic games for the plot, but there was definitely a sense of cohesion missing here. So how does the gameplay stack up? Well, it's got just about everything you'd expect from a classic Sonic game. Sonic has his drop dash from Sonic Mania, which makes him lots of fun to speedrun with, but there are no elemental shields for him to utilize in this game, which really sucks. The only shields that we have are the standard shield, and this magnet shield that draws rings towards you, like the electric shield from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but it hardly qualifies as a shield since it doesn't protect you from losing rings for one hit, and doesn't allow Sonic to double jump. I have no idea why the other shields were left behind. They really help Sonic to stand out from the other characters. As for them, there's pretty much nothing out of the ordinary. Tails can fly, Knuckles can glide and climb walls, Amy is in this game as well with her double jump and running hammer swing from Sonic Origins, and after being the main story, you can also play through a second campaign as Trip, who I'd describe as a fusion between Knuckles and Amy. She can double jump like Amy, but she can also cling to walls and ceilings and roll along them, akin to Knuckles' ability to climb walls. Playing as her feels like a faster paced version of Knuckles, but you do sacrifice the ability to glide and potentially skip huge chunks of the level. Overall, a welcome addition to the classic roster. Trip really is a sweet character, and I really hope we see more of her in future classic games, or maybe we could even see a modern iteration of her. That would be really cool, I think. In terms of general control, I feel like a lot of people were worried that the physics would be completely butchered due to this being in a 2.5D style, much like Sonic 4, but I'm happy to say this isn't the case, at least in my opinion. The physics feel almost the same as Sonic Mania. You gain a lot of momentum rolling down slopes, and there are plenty of instances where you could use the terrain and physics to your advantage to reach higher routes, or pull off some really cool stunts. I've seen some people say the physics don't feel that good, but I personally don't see it. I mean, yeah, they aren't literally one-to-one the same as Sonic Mania's. Feels like momentum is a tiny bit slower to build up when going down slopes, but it's definitely more than close enough. I'd say it's about 95% there, which is absolutely fine by me. A big point of development was trying to recreate the physics engine from Sonic Mania as closely as possible in the game's 2.5D environment. And I'd say they pretty much succeeded in doing that, so props to Sonic Team and Arzest there. Next, let's talk about the level design. Something that had a lot of people pumped for this game was that it would feature entirely original zones, unlike Sonic Mania, which remixed most of its zones from previous Sonic games. The game starts out very strong with Bridge Island, which has a unique aesthetic to it that feels like a mix of Green Hill and Seaside Hill. Playing this zone got me really excited for the adventure ahead. Next up was Speed Jungle, which I think is one of the best zones in the game. Punchy, tropical-inspired, energetic music, very fast-paced gameplay with the rail grinding, and a colorful backdrop. I think this checks off most, if not all of the boxes for a great classic Sonic zone. The only low point I'd say was the bosses, but we'll get into that later. Sky Temple is honestly nothing special to me. It feels like great value Sky Sanctuary. Not a terrible zone, just relatively unremarkable. Pinball Carnival seems to start off as your typical Sonic casino level, but the second act shakes things up with a really interesting spooky Halloween aesthetic and an interesting gimmick in navigating these fast-moving roller coasters. It really gives your reflexes a workout. Lagoon City? Another Sonic level that isn't agonizingly painful? Again, except for the boss. Yes please. Sand Sanctuary. They're really getting creative with these zone names, aren't they? Yeah, this is basically Sandopolis again. So much for all new zones. Press Factory. Probably the worst zone of the game. The press in the background constantly flinging you into the air and messing up your flow. The abundance of gotcha deaths through instant crushing. I swear this zone wants to be Sonic Advance 3 so bad. Golden Capital has kind of a unique theme to it, but it's basically another casino level, only this time with really annoying and boring auto-scrolling sections. Why are these still in platformers even in 2023? Cyber Station is another highlight of the game. The music goes ridiculously hard, and it has a share of fun, yet non-intrusive gimmicks. Except for the part where you turn into a mouse. Your movement is pretty restricted on this grid, which makes it kind of annoying to get to the top. Overall, a really solid level though. I just hate that it's only one act. Yeah, this game is a little weird in that regard. Some zones only have one act, where others can have as many as 3. Some of which force you to take control of one of the game's characters and use their unique skills to get through. The character exclusive acts I think are pretty neat. They kind of force you to get good with a particular character. But man, I was enjoying Cyber Station so much, I didn't want it to end. Next up is Frozen Base, which kinda feels like it's just there. Nothing really of note to say about this zone, though Act 2 does channel its inner Sonic frontiers and have you play a side-scrolling shooter out of nowhere. And finally, we end up with Death Egg number 450, Egg Fortress, which is very unique in that the second act is basically the first act in reverse due to Eggman's use of his time manipulation device. Overall, the level design isn't terrible, but I definitely enjoyed the levels in previous classic games more. The issue I kind of have is that it feels like it's hard for you to go fast when you want to, even when you know the level design. This is especially true in Trip Story, which is basically the main game, but with almost intentionally worse level design. Seriously, Trip Story is awful. There are so many more spikes and instances of BS enemy placement that you'll almost never have more than 10 rings at any given time. If you're gonna make a hard mode, make it an actual legitimate test of the player's skill. Too many games have a hard mode where they butcher the level design on purpose and call it a day, and unfortunately Superstars follows this trend. And what makes it suck even more is that you have to beat Trip's campaign in order to access the true final boss of the game. Speaking of bosses, these are absolutely, hands down, the worst bosses in Sonic history. They are so annoying, almost physically painful to fight, and they significantly drag the whole game down. Most of them sit off screen most of the time like the little sissies they are, throwing attacks at you, and then they oh so graciously present themselves for you to bop once. Just once, because they have like a 3-second long invincibility period after you hit them. And this slows these boss fights down to such a dreadful crawl that you'd sell your firstborn child into slavery for them to end. They're not even hard, mostly just tedious. This is awful boss design considering that in previous 2D Sonic games, yes, you only had to hit them 8 times usually, and as such you could destroy them quite quickly, but they were a lot more engaging and satisfying to fight because the better you were at exploring their most vulnerable periods, the more you could hit them and the faster you could end the fight. You had a sense of satisfaction tearing a boss that used to give you trouble to shreds in a matter of seconds due to mastering their attack patterns and vulnerability windows. Here there's none of that. It's just wait for the boss to present itself, hit them once, repeat. And some of these bosses take almost as long, if not longer than the act itself. I mean, look at my timer here when I pass the checkpoint before the boss. Now look at my timer after I beat the boss. That is ridiculous! I guess they thought other classic Sonic bosses were too easy, so they wanted to make these ones harder, except these aren't even hard, just annoying, except for one. Trip's final boss! I seriously hope whoever greenlit the design of this boss is forced to walk a mile on a trail of Legos barefoot. This is a culmination of everything wrong with the previous bosses. Fang is completely unable to be hit most of the time, turning the boss into a tedious waiting game as usual, but this time he has instant kill attacks, meaning even one little mistake will force you to contend with this slogfest all over again. And just when you think the torture is over, he comes out with a second phase that has even more insta-kill attacks, plus electric traps, he says, that will completely immobilize you, leaving your rear exit primed for the breaching like it's a Call of Duty campaign. Yet again, an extremely cheap and low-effort way to increase difficulty. Makes you wonder why they even bothered giving you rings before the fight. Speaking of that, yes, there were other bosses in classic Sonic games where you had 0 rings before the fight, but the bosses were much quicker to beat. Again, dying during phase 2 means you've got to go through the entire fight all over again. Did I mention that this crap can take close to 10 minutes? For real, whoever designed this boss should lose their boss design privileges. Forever. They're hands down the lowest point of Sonic Superstars, and some of the worst experiences I've had with Sonic in recent memory. The true final boss isn't nearly as bad, but also quite underwhelming for a final boss in a Sonic game. Like most bosses in this game, there's no direct combat, just waiting around for him to use attacks that you can knock back at him. He does also have an insta-kill attack in these black holes, but you can easily get out of them by dashing, so they're not too bad. Honestly, why isn't Trip involved in this fight directly? We see her turn into a freaking dragon with the Chaos Embers after she decides she's had enough of Fang pushing her around. So why couldn't we have a situation like, say, Sonic Adventure 2 or Sonic Rush where we can switch between the two intermittently? Or maybe even like Generations where we can switch between them on the fly. She is supposed to be the guardian of the North Star Islands after all, so it's only right. Plus I think it would have made a nice conclusion to her character arc after gaining the self-confidence to stand up to Fang. You know, gaining some confidence in herself and fulfilling her duty as guardian. At least you have the emerald powers to make these bosses a tad bit less painful. Some of them are definitely more useful than others. The blue emerald allows you to use Avatar, which summons a ton of clones to attack every enemy on screen. Quite useful for getting free hits in against these trash bosses and making the torture end as fast as possible. Bullet is hands down the best one, as it allows you to dash through the air and reach higher routes with little effort. Great for bypassing platforming sections you find bothersome. Vision is very rarely of any use, only revealing hidden platforms and rings. You only ever get use out of it when you use it when the game prompts you. Water liquefies you and allows you to climb waterfalls. Again, very situational, but it does allow you to avoid death by crushing, which is pretty nifty. Ivy is kinda like Bullet in that it allows you to easily reach higher ground, although Bullet has more utility. I really only use Ivy when I've already used Bullet and I need to climb upwards. Slow allows you to use Chaos Control before Chaos Control is a thing, and slow down time, allowing you to react to bosses and the like more efficiently. Also one of the better abilities. Finally, Extra allows you to do a special move depending on the character. Sonic gets the homing attack, Tails gets to launch a little tornado with his tails, Knuckles gets to do a shockwave punch, Amy gets to throw hammers, and Trip shoots a fireball, referencing her dragon form. The special stages themselves are pretty cool, not the half-pipe again or blue spheres, god I hated blue spheres. You have to chase down the Chaos Emerald by swinging on blue spheres, requiring you to use the momentum you gain off of the swings to catch up to the emerald. And I don't know how to do proper segues yet, so let's just talk about the music. My opinion on the soundtrack is just about the same as everyone else, mixed as heck. It gives you severe whiplash too. 1 second you could be listening to a certified T-Lopes bop that sounds like it came straight out of Sonic Mania. The next you're hearing some repetitive, unpleasant to the ears Sonic 4 sounding crap like the early game boss theme that only has like a 20 to 30 second loop. be honest, I have a bit of nostalgia for Sonic 4 as I played it a lot when I was like 10 years old, so I do have a bit of a soft spot for its soundtrack. But even I can't lie and tell you that some of these songs are good. This game had quite the list of composers, from good old Jun Sonoe and T. Lopes to Hidenori Shoji, composer known for his work with the Yakuza series and F-Zero GX, and Toriana, an artist popular for her chiptune songs who also had a hand in the soundtrack of Team Sonic Racing. Jun Sonoe in particular has been getting absolutely dragged for his compositions in this game. And I can't entirely blame people, as it feels like he's trying way too hard to emulate the Genesis style music, but just keeps falling short. It does make me sad to see him getting so much flack, especially when he absolutely never misses when it comes to his compositions for the 3D games. I think he just needs to leave the Genesis sound font in 1994 and try some new things with his classic style compositions. That's not to say all of the Genesis styled songs in this game are bad. I enjoy Sky Temple and Frozen Base Act 1 and Act Tales. I mean, absolutely no disrespect to Jun. He's probably my favorite video game music composer, and his tunes have had a huge impact on my childhood. It's just that I know he can do so much better than this, but he insists on handicapping himself with these fake wannabe Genesis instruments. Overall, I wouldn't call Sonic Superstars a bad game by any means, but it has a lot of snags that bring the entire experience way down, making it, in my opinion, probably the worst of the mainline classic Sonic games. You could argue that in a way, Superstars was doomed from the start. Sonic Mania set astronomical expectations for the classic series that Superstars would be hard pressed to meet, but without the original team on deck, that probably was not going to happen. Even with all the extra content like co-op multiplayer and the battle mode, I would not have priced this at $60. Even in 2023, I'd say your money is far better spent on Sonic Mania. It may be a bit lacking in originality, but it is easily one of the best Sonic games and 2D platformers in recent memory, and I cannot in good faith tell you to go below $60 on Superstars when you can get an even better experience for just $20. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Sonic Superstars. Let me know what you think about the game in the comments. Do you think it's worth the $60 price? Did it live up to your expectations? I'd love to hear what you think. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.